Hi, Mike and Mo here.
Mike and Mo.
He's Mike, I'm Mo.
And I got my name first, so I'm the one that you're gonna have most fun with, right?
Yeah, I gave in and just let him. But actually, I just thought that it sounded better. Actually, Karis, like I said, his wife Karis is the one that thought that would be a good name because that's how she calls us and addresses us. So today we're gonna, be talking about an interesting subject. It's not religion as a whole, but we're gonna talk about some of our past with how we felt about the way that we grew up and the religion that was, pretty much given to us, and how we both kind of decided, to go in a different way, at least for the time being. Please know that I am not personally, and you can agree or disagree with me on this one, I am not against any religion whatsoever. I feel like that any thing that brings us closer to God Almighty is worth every ounce that is spent on it, every moment that is spent on it, and everything. So I just want everybody to know up front. I mean, I kind of think, don't you feel the same way? Like you're not really against any.
Absolutely. And I'll hopefully I'm not interrupting your thought process, but I thought immediately about fast forwarding from the start of us being Catholics. When I started kind of going away from the church a little bit, I remember sitting down with my father, who was very, very pretty strict Catholic, more strict than Mom actually. But I sat down with him one day and I said, "You know what, Dad?" I said, "I'm not sure if I believe in God." So this was probably when I was
I kind of remember that.
Late teenager, maybe early 20s, but I said, "I don't know if I believe in God." Maybe I was younger, I don't know. But anyway, it was around that time, and my first thought was, "Oh my God, he's going to fall off his chair. He's going to jump up and grab me and shake me." And he just
and the thing that he didn't tell you about before he said that is that our dad was paralyzed from the waist down since he was 40 years old. So
for him to jump up and grab me would have been really difficult.
Exactly.
But to say that to him, it was gonna initiate a very difficult response, I'm sure. And he did like he usually did. He kept cool when it was a father type of situation. Being fathering to one of his children. He remained cool, and he said, "Well, that's interesting. Why do you think you don't believe in God?" I said, "Well, I don't really have any good reasons." I said, "But here's the thing." Because I guess what it was to me is the story just didn't match up in my mind. I was questioning the whole story of how things started in this world. And I just didn't really buy the whole story about how things started in this world. And which now I do a lot more. I'm just saying at that point I didn't. And I said, "Well, but here's the thing, Dad, it's okay. If there is no God, I'm fine with that. And here's why. Because all of the different religions in this world, they all pretty much practice being loving and good to one another. And that usually is the foundation, whether it's Jesus being the one that set the greatest example of all for so many people, or all the different religions have somebody or some figure or some faith teaching that is centered around love and loving people and respect and all kinds of other things, But I said, so if this world didn't have any religion, we'd be screwed. It would just be a chaotic, everyday people doing whatever the hell they want and, being way out of control. So that was my logical side of me saying that it's okay if there's no God. Now, of course, since then, we're going to talk about a lot of reasons why I know there is a higher power, and whatever you want to call that, you can call it, but I guarantee it. I tell it to my kids, if I pray, that doesn't really mean something's going to happen. And we'll talk a lot about that, but really that's kind of what made me think of that when you brought it up. So go ahead, Mark.
Oh. No, I mean, I like, hearing that story because Mike had the boldness to be able to say that to my dad, which I never in a million years, if I was thinking it, would have ever said it to my dad. But there's the guy and the girl. And the difference is I think that I think that Dad was open, to hearing your discussion about it, where I think if I would have brought it up to him, he would have said, I mean, who knows, but it was a different, atmosphere for the girls. And we grew up, you know, with the, you know, strict rules that came with Catholicism. And we went to church, you know, every Sunday. We filed into church. We had to sit in the front pew.
The front pew.
Every week. So all 9 of us, 7 kids, mom and dad, filed in, you know, to the front row. I mean, many times I felt like I just wanted to stand out. I wanted to make sure that I had my best dress on and my best shoes. I wanted everybody to see how well dressed I was. It kind of became more about that, but I was a kid. When I got older, you know, I just thought that I was going to, you know, be Catholic, you know, my whole life, because that's kind of how it is presented to you. And I didn't have many problems with it. I mean, I do know that I faked going to church a lot. We had a church in our neighborhood that had a 5 o'clock mass on Sunday. And once I got my driver's license, I'd say to my mom, oh, I'm going to go, you know, to St. Boniface at 5 o'clock. And I would go and I'd run in there and get a bulletin just in case she asked.
And then
I'd sit in the parking lot the whole entire time smoking cigarettes. I was like, I don't know why I just didn't go in, but it was just, you know, I was young. I was, you know, probably 18 years old. And so I did do that for several years. And then when I got married the first time, my first husband was not Catholic, and he really wasn't any religion, and we had to go through, you know, this training, you know, marital training, and it was, you know, kind of renewed my faith in the whole, you know, religion, and I felt, you know, really good about it, you know, at that point. And then even when we got divorced, you know, I wanted to get an annulment, because if I got married again, of course I was going to get married in a Catholic church, you know, you had to have an annulment. And a lot of people at the time now, did you have to get an annulment? Because you guys got married in a Catholic church. So
yeah,
did you?
But my second marriage
was not Catholic.
Was not
okay.
Catholic. Yeah.
So the way that if you don't know, if you get divorced in the Catholic church and you're going to get remarried in the Catholic church, you're required to get an annulment. And the annulment was pretty expensive at the time. I don't remember how much it was, but everybody was complaining about how expensive it was.
It's just another money grab. Oh, sorry.
But I honestly, and in all honesty, I can look back and say it was probably the best thing I could have done, because it really, really made me end in my mind that first marriage.
Oh, put closure to it.
Yeah, it put a big closure to it, which I think was the intent of the Catholic Church. You know, through that process is like, hey, you know, in order to get married again, you need to get rid of that first marriage in your mind. And I didn't know that it had taken up so much of my mind. And so I willingly, you know, got the annulment. The process was daunting. At one time during the process, I did have to meet with my first husband and talk some things out, and that was interesting. But so I didn't really have a problem, you know, with that process. I honestly really didn't have a lot of problems with the Catholic Church at all. I felt...
I did, but go ahead.
I kind of felt like it was superior. I think that we are conditioned to feel like that it was a superior religion. I don't think that anymore. But I felt like almost kind of full of myself, because I'm Catholic, and so I'm the best religion that there is. I go to church every Sunday, so I'm perfect.
And because of that, you're going to go to heaven, and everything's going to be great.
Yeah. I mean, what are the problems that you had with it?
Well, it was just always too strict, and just not open-minded enough, but really it was based out of fear. I think the religion is based out of fear. I'm not a historian, but the uneducated things that I've seen or heard about from years, you know, hundreds of years ago, is that, you know, it was based out of fear, and that the Catholic Church latched on to powerful leaders that were, you know, that were sucking the people dry, and the Catholic, you know, the highest priest of the Catholicism, you know, would tell the people that you need to give, you need to be a part of this, or else you're not loyal to your king and you're not loyal to your country. And so they shamed people, or I think that they make people fear that if they didn't do what they were being told in that regard, then they were going to go to hell and they were going to rot in hell. And so if you don't conform to all of these things we're making or telling you to do, then you're going to go to hell. And I think that's what it was largely based on, and I think it still is. I think they still try and scare you into thinking that if you're not this devout Catholic person that goes to church every Sunday, that says the prayers and prays the rosary and does all these things, that you're going to go to hell. And, you know,
it's true.
We both know that we don't know if that's true or not, but yet that's not a way to live your life as far as I'm concerned. Now, when I die and I'm judged, you know, maybe it's going to be like, aha, we told you.
Oh my gosh, aren't we going to be surprised? We're gonna get up there and we're like, are you kidding me? I really didn't think that's the way that it was.
Right.
Yeah, but again, that's kind of what was ingrained in us about that.
Yeah. So the structure in itself, and the belief in itself, and the stories, and the faith, and you know, because I like going to Catholic churches still because of the energy. When you're in a room full of that many people, that their thoughts and their ideas are about really good things, or really wanting to, you know, ask for forgiveness for the bad things. I think that's just an energy that's in there that you can't match in many places ever. So I still like going just for the energy of the people that are at church.
I mean, I don't feel that way at all. I almost feel like, honestly, that in the Catholic Church it's very low energy, that it's in the other churches that there's more
much
energy.
Higher. But what I'm saying is I go to Catholic masses sometimes because my mom does, you know, and I like to spend time with my mom.
He meant to say our mother, but that's okay.
Did I say my mom?
Yeah.
Well, she is.
It's okay.
I think she favors me more. But.
Of course, he's a boy.
Yeah. So, but no, yes, our mom. I mean, she. You know, if she's going to church by herself, you know, hopefully one of us is always going to be able to go with her. But if not, it's not the end of the world. So I'll go. Or if we're going to meet, we meet at Cecil Whitaker's Pizza every Sunday, whether people go to church or not. But if I'm going to go from Kirkwood to South St. Louis, I might as well go to the church with Mom as well. So anyway, when I'm there, I don't sit there and think, well, they're too strict. They're too, you know, they're putting this stuff in my head. And they're trying to get me to fear for what I'm doing. I don't feel that way. Instead, I feel, you know, I just feel solemn, and I feel the peace, and I feel the energy that's there. And, you know, during songs, or even when people pray together, and I can't stand a lot of their prayers because they're 90 words of stuff that doesn't really even make sense in it, but it's a da-da, 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 and you're just like, it's almost like a chant or a rant of like devil worshiping, right? You know,
Yeah.
That's what it kind of sounds like sometimes, but yeah, that's the energy that you're absolutely right. Energy from other churches, and that's why I'm not Catholic anymore, is amazing, and we'll be talking about that a lot.
Yeah, and I, you know, feel that honestly, like going into the Catholic church, like you talk about, you know, going to church with Mom. It's like the only time I really go to a Catholic church is for weddings and funerals. I don't even really go for Mom's purpose anymore, because I feel like that she didn't really wasn't open arms with my change and with my church. In fact, a lot of times, and she's, you know, this is my mother who is Catholic, who I love, you know, dearly, but many times when I'll say something about my church, she'll like, oh, it's not even a church, you know.
Well, and you know, and your church I've been to a couple times for services, and there was things I loved about it, and things I was like, I don't want to be a part of this, you know. Not that it was bad, it just wasn't in my favor.
And it is what you get, you know. It is what you get used to. And I mean, we basically there was a couple things that happened with me, because like I said, I never had planned on going away from the Catholic Church, but when we went through one of the most difficult times of our life, financially, we basically lost everything. And, you know, we were going, you know, to the Catholic Church, and
of course, she's talking about her and her current husband and children and the life, and it had a lot to do with loss from the restaurant and everything, but that's different stories.
Yeah, but we were like in a financial hole that like you couldn't even dig yourself out of, and the Catholic Church didn't even reach out, didn't even acknowledge it. I mean, my children, we were all part of the church. We were all very, very much involved, and they never reached out. They never said, is there any way, that we can help? And it's like, I just always believed, that the church was a community, and that when somebody in your community is suffering, that you help them. My whole attitude is, and though it's probably wrong, is you can spend all of this money on buildings and make sure that buildings have the newest facilities and the newest everything, and so that it attracts people to come to it. But when there's people in your church that actually need help from the community, and you can't be there for them, then I don't think that the buildings make a difference. And so I had a big issue.
Well, I'll look at all of you out there and say, how would you feel if you were part of this community for so long and you've given so much, maybe not as much as others, but still you're part of that community, and something like that happens and you're pretty much just not really paid attention to? I mean, how does that make you feel? I mean, whether you're pro-Catholic or not, that's not right.
Right.
And another good example of that was when our father, who was in a wheelchair, sat in the front of church every single Sunday, sang every song, was diligent at tithing with the church, and was always a big proponent of the church. And the Monsignor of the church would walk by him every day when he would get prepared to start the Mass, and never even, my dad would always say, "Good morning, Father," and he never even looked at my dad. And my dad was known in that church and in the community as just a very sweet, good man.
Well, and our whole family went to the same church.
Yeah.
Like almost every one of us went to the same
There was
church.
like 20,
we were all
20
very involved.
20 plus members of our family were there almost every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And now, did we deserve special treatment? No, but that was just that guy, that person.
Yeah.
But, then my father, finally had to put him in a home because we couldn't take care of him anymore, and he needed that type of care.
Yep.
And the church and that same pastor never went to visit him. Not once.
Not once. In 6.5 years.
And it sounds like, we're kind of pissed about that, which I guess we are, but I'm asking you, what would you think if that was you?
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous.
I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people think, that we should have just, brushed that off and had no problems with it. But I did have a problem with it because I didn't feel that was what Jesus, set forth for his church to be. He wanted the church to be the community that stood up for the people that were in the community. And I didn't feel like that was, in fact, with my dad's funeral, we actually had, at the time, this wasn't a good, it wasn't a well-known practice, but we just had a ceremony, a mass at the church that we're talking about. And when the priest, told us, we couldn't have this visitation, or we could only have one person give a eulogy, or what, we just basically said, we're going to do it the way we want to do it. And he just kind of like bowed out because it was like he was up against our family wall. And so,
and there's 3 other Catholic priests. Was it 3?
Yeah.
From different parishes that used to be our pastor, at either St. Cecilia's or St. Stephen's years ago.
Right.
And they were like standing in line saying, "I want to do that service."
Right. So there was a lot of my children, went to the Catholic school for as long as we could afford, for them to go, and then we couldn't afford that anymore, and we had to put them in a public school, and nobody reached out to us and said, "Is there anything we can do to help?" Even though I was on the committee that helped all of the people that couldn't afford tuition get money for their tuition. But when it came time for us, there wasn't anything offered to us. And when I said, we're going to have to leave, they were just like, "Yeah, that's probably a better thing." And I really thought that was unfortunate. But then my children, we continued going to the church. My children continued to go to the church. My children they're boys, so they were both servers, altar boys. And nobody else showed up. Every Sunday, my boys would be called up to the front to serve because the people that were on the schedule didn't show up. And the priest did not know their names. He didn't, talk to them. He didn't, ask any questions or anything. All he ever said to them was, well, why aren't you going to this school? You need to talk to your parents. They need to give up something to afford this education. He had never asked me what kind of situation we were even in. And so then one Sunday, my older son was a sophomore in high school. My younger son was in 8th grade. And we're getting ready to go to church. We weren't even living in the neighborhood anymore. And we're getting ready to go to church. And my youngest son said, I'm not going. And we're like, well, what do you mean you're not going? He was like, I'm not going back to that church. And we were just like, my husband and I were like, what are we going to do? We actually physically put him in the car. But by that time, we were too late to go to the mass. So we decided we're going to look for other churches. So we went to several other Catholic churches over the course of a couple weeks. Neither one of my sons, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. And so my husband and I had a conversation, and we said, what's more important, that our children go to a Catholic church or that they go to a church that they want to go to every Sunday and that they like it and that they feel like they're a part of? And we both decided that it was more important that they go to church, like to be involved in a church. So that's when we set out past the Catholic church, and went to non-denominational churches. And one church stood out to both of my kids, and both my kids said, yeah, this is where we want to go. And throughout their whole high school, they went to church at Sunday service. They went to youth group on Wednesday nights where they had service, and they both became very involved in the church. My one youngest son is still a youth leader and is very involved in church. Like he wouldn't even take a job that he would have to work on a Wednesday night because that's how connected he is to the church. And so it's like, when we ventured out, it was a scary thing, because you probably felt the same way. You're sitting in this brand new church and you kind of walk in feeling like, well, I'm superior because I'm Catholic. And all these people here probably have no idea how to do church. I honestly, I felt that way. I felt like that everything that they were doing was lower than the Catholic Church.
Yeah, I guess that's why I would still, in a different church, I would still like genuflect before I get into the row of seats or whatever, or I would still do all the little nuanced things that Catholics do, even though I didn't want to be any part of a Catholic anymore. I guess I did it because I thought I was kind of high and mighty, that I was Mr. Ex-Catholic, so I knew better than them. I never thought about that until you just said that.
Yeah, it was kind of like, that. I mean, I felt that way, for a while, and then that kind of wore off, and then I, started just really enjoying the deeper lessons that I felt like I was getting from it. Like, instead of it being a ceremony, like I think a Catholic Mass is a ceremonial type thing, and nothing wrong with that, but I liked going to a new non-denominational church because it was like, first of all, the pastor was married and had children and kind of like could relate to us. I liked that. That was my first time, because Catholic priests aren't married and they don't have children, or most of them don't. And so that was interesting, to hear their perspective about God in the home and in the family based on their home and their family. And they had jobs. Most non-denominational pastors, that's not their only job, because there's, usually not enough money to raise a family on that. So I was very, very taken by that. But my father was still living at the time that we made this change, and I couldn't even talk to him about it. I'd bring it up. I tried to tell him, and I don't want to hear it, Maureen. I don't want to hear it. Was he open to you when you changed? Was he like...
I had to tread very lightly, and I had to, because I was like so excited and so like almost born again from a spiritual standpoint. I had always considered myself spiritual, but it was just amazing. And I would just wanted to share with him the amazement of things that I was learning and the things that were happening. But I was like, I gotta tread lightly because he's not gonna really accept this. And so every time I did talk to him, I was a little bit worried that he was gonna do what he did to you. But I'm one of his sons.
Yeah.
So,
and there you go. There's the difference. I mean, he wasn't mean about it or anything, but he wasn't open to talking about it. My mom is still not open to talking about it because I've said to her many times, this has nothing, to do with you. I am not like doing this to hurt you. I'm not doing this to defy you in any way. This is just the path that I felt like I needed to go. And it never really sank in with her. It really never, and I'm okay with that. Like to a certain extent, I'm okay with that. Part of it makes me sad because there's so much more, to God and Jesus and following Jesus than there is to just one religion. And one of the things that, and I'm just thinking this right now because what I really want to point out for me, one of the biggest differences that I see based on what I was brought up with and what I have now learned is turning things over to God. The Catholic Church, I don't feel like they really explored that. Like I never knew what they were when the new church, when they were talking about you turn it over to God, you hand it over to God. When you have a worry, you hand it over to God. Either I just totally missed it in my Catholic upbringing, but I don't feel like they really touched upon that. I do feel like that they did definitely have a basis of like that you can take ownership for your successes, whereas in real Christianity we're not successful at anything. Jesus and God are what has given us everything that we have. And I think that was a different, it's all Christian, but the way that the Catholics, portrayed it as far as my understanding. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, and it's it's really important. I know that a ton of people struggle with these types of things, and you could base it. There's scripture, there's the Bible with scripture and all kinds of readings that one of the biggest problems is that people interpret it in different ways, and the interpretation of giving yourself up to God in a lot of the scripture readings is it basically says give all of your belongings, all of your wealth, all of your possessions, and it's not really meant to say it like that, but there's some times that you're told that's what you need to give up. It never really gets to the root of what you just talked about, and unless you go to a church where you have someone who understands that message and knows how important it is to you.
There you go. Yep.
And there'll be a lot of hopefully Catholic priests are going to watch this podcast and listen to it, and they're going to probably be incensed by some of the things we're saying, but some of them will probably defend themselves and say, well, you guys just went to the wrong church. And that's very true. I went to many Catholic churches around the country when I was living on my own. Some of them were worse than others, but there was a lot of them that it really depends on who is really running that church and what, because they didn't have much room to do what they wanted to do, but you could tell the ones that did use the room they had to make something more meaningful out of it.
Right. And I again, like I said at the beginning, whatever way somebody worships, our Heavenly Father, I'm all for that. I would never put it down. I would never look at it like it's a bad thing. But for me personally, I knew there had to have been more. I kept feeling inside of me, there's more. And I think I was in my 50s.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not going to say how old I am now.
40s for me, late 40s, but yeah.
But I was in my 50s, and so 50, all of that time, always, every single week, it was, pretty much the same thing. It was the same messages were, basically the same. And to then all of a sudden be exposed to a different point of view, a different perspective of Christianity was lovely to me. It renewed me. It like gave me wind beneath my wings. I am so grateful in my life for the change. I feel like it was one of the best things that I ever could have done. And, to this day, I have never, ever looked back and thought, I shouldn't have done that. I should have stayed in the Catholic Church or whatever. I totally feel like it changed my life.
Yeah, and the bottom line is both of us are saying right now, but I'll say it more specifically, we had a really good foundation from the Catholic Church. Never forget it, and always will respect and admire the fact that we were able to get that. But you and I are both probably the most spiritual people in our family. I would say more spiritually than even our mother. And
if one of our siblings are listening to this and Peggy's in heaven, she's probably going to be like, how dare you?
No, it's true. I would tell her if she came to me, in a dream or in my prayers and say, anyway, we are the two most spiritual people in our family. And we went away from and neither one of us go to the same church right now. Yeah. They're kind of different, really, in a lot of ways. But anyway, I could go to my brother Tom, that's my guy. My guy is my brother Tom. He's
it's the bro thing.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite people ever. But I could tell you, and he's been Catholic his whole life. He's never been staunch, I would say, about it, but he's very Catholic, and I don't think he'll ever be as spiritual, anywhere near as spiritual as either one of us. And I think that Catholicism, in a lot, at least the churches that he's been going to, it doesn't lend towards that. It takes away some of your spirituality.
Exactly. I agree with that. And I think, that some of our other siblings, they're all on a different path, but, our sister Peggy that passed away, was definitely a lot like Mom, Catholic, and, was very ingrained in that and everything. And we didn't have a lot of spiritual conversations. But that last year that she was alive, we did.
Yes.
And there was many times that she said to me, wow, Maureen, how did you, which that's my real name is Maureen, just in case you're wondering who I'm talking about. How, did you know that? Where did you get this from? Or how have you been able to do this? And because she had not entered that kind of spiritual level. But by the time she passed, she was at a spiritual level that I had never seen her before in her life. And so I'm very grateful for that. But it was a hard transition for us to break the mold in our family. And I still think that at times, maybe other people in our family might, kind of like look down on us a little bit about it. However, it used to matter to me. It just doesn't matter to me anymore because I love where I'm at.
Right, and that's because, like I said, my brother Tom may never feel the same way I or you feel about our belief in the fact that there is something bigger than us that is guiding us all the time. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to go to church every single week and do the same prayers and the same things every week. We don't have to live on fear. Our lives are enriched so much by our spirituality that we may never have gotten if we wouldn't have gone in the path that we went.
Yes,
I firmly believe that.
So it's time to end the podcast for today.
Oh, what?
I know. It's like we might have to do an extension of this at some point.
Are we never going to talk about religion again?
I'm sure that we will. But we would love for you guys to tell us what you think and tell us where you're at, with your spiritual life. You can write to us in comments, or you can always get a hold of us at the bottom of wherever this podcast is being broadcast. We'd love to hear from you, so please, let us know because we're really interested to see where you're at.
Yeah, and hit me between the eyes because I'll probably do the same, but yeah.
Ooh, and then we'll have a whole podcast about hitting him between the eyes. Anyway, so have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.